So, time for another homework video. And as usual, the idea here is that I show you an effect, and before you watch the video, you try to achieve this yourself. There is no right or wrong. It is about trying to figure out, with the knowledge that you already have, how to create something like that. That also means your solution doesn't have to be exactly like mine. It's just about thinking about this, and finding different solutions is actually a good thing. Because as you know, if you give a problem to 10 different Houdini artists, you will get 10 different solutions. To be fair, in this case, that's a bit unlikely, but you will find certain things that you probably did slightly different to me. So what this is about is a very simple effect actually, and that is rain and snow. So rain looks like this. Oops, it's selected, so it's not supposed to be yellow rain. So this is the rain effect. Very simple, nothing too crazy. It's really just about going through all the steps and trying to solve problems that may arise. Also, have a look, there's no splash or anything on the ground. This is something you can do if you want. We will learn later on a couple of notes to do this, but for now, keep it simple, don't overcomplicate it. And another thing which is in some respect simpler, in some respect harder, is creating this snow effect here. Again, no big interaction with the ground, none actually. And one thing that is important, I use a render camera here that I'm looking from. You don't have to care about the things you don't see. Try to find a simple solution so that it works right from this camera. Nothing else matters. So give that a try and see you in a bit. Now, how do we do this? Actually, it's really simple because we just want the points to come from above. So this is what I meant with keep it simple, because that just means as a source, we just take a big plane that is outside of the camera. Problem solved. So if we look from outside, you can see here's my camera, there is the plane. Since nobody sees it, it's perfectly fine. Practical solutions. And now, of course, we can use a PopNet, and this should already give us something when we press start, because the points will, no, actually that's not true. Most important stuff is missing, and that is of course the gravity. So there you go. And now the points fall down. But we run into a problem when you try this that we've already seen, and that is this strobo effect, I call it, that you can see basically the moment where the points were born, and since they're accelerated by the same gravity, they end up with this line here that you can see through the camera. Multiple ways of solving this. The easiest and, in my opinion, most effective is to just give the points a little bit of a different start velocity. You can actually do this with the default settings in the set initial velocity, because the variants will already take care of this. So if I press start, you can see the strobing effect is gone. It's only that the points are a bit boring. It's kind of okay, but let's add a little bit to this. And we can do this, for example, with a pop force or a pop wind. I use a pop wind because I usually think it's nicer to use a speed that never accelerates over a certain point, because that's what happens in reality because of the air resistance. You could have also used a pop force in combination with a pop drag to get the same result, but the pop wind kind of has both in itself in a way. And we add a little bit of velocity, and you can't see it, but this axis here we're looking at directly is x. So let's do -1, let's say, to give this a little bit of a movement to the side. That's enough. And then we add a little bit of chaos to this. Not too much, because otherwise we have a storm, but it's up to you. And it looks already a little bit like snow. But if we do this just a little bit, then we have something more or less natural. Now the next thing is, let's add a little bit of a trail. So a normal trail is what we need. And let's switch this to compute as polygons and don't close the rows. And in this case, that actually works, because we have a lifespan of 100 and they will die below the camera. But if for some reason you set the lifespan to something very short, then you might run into the problem of the dying points, which results in different point numbers. And that means, to be absolutely safe so that this doesn't happen, we just use the better alternative. We use preserve original, and then we use an add on top, of course, to connect those points based on their ID. And there we have it. And let's add a grid to this. In this case, you know, I didn't even include the collision with the ground. This is something you can do, but you will see it actually creates a couple of problems because those points will then start to collide with the ground and bump around and all that. So actually, surprisingly, what you see is actually that the drops hit the ground and kind of disappear. So once again, it's not about real physics or anything, it's about the perception. So if they fly through, it actually looks like they disappear, job done. So keep it simple and practical sometimes. Okay, so that's the rain. And how about the snow? The snow, and actually let's save a bit of time by just copying this. So we don't want to do everything again. What we don't need is the trails. So let's get rid of this part because we only need points. And we might change, you know, the look of this a little bit because currently it might fall a bit too fast. It looks too heavy when we do this. Of course, a matter of choice, but that's how I perceive it. So how can we make it fly less fast down? Well, just lower the gravity. Why not? And that's another thing. There's nothing wrong about breaking physics when it works for you. And now the lifespan is a problem for us. So let's go back to the original 100. And you can see technically, because they are lighter, they should just react differently to the gravity. But to save some time, we just use gravity and lower it, and then it feels the same, maybe even to -3. You could have used a pop drag instead and all that kind of complicated stuff, but why? Sometimes just changing the gravity is perfectly fine. And the pop wind maybe is a bit too strong, personal taste, maybe 0.2, and then we add a little bit more amplitude from the noise so that we feel like the wind is actually, you know, pushing our snow around a bit more. So this is another thing where you need to find the right numbers, and maybe I have a bit too many of them, so I lower the constant birth rate, and I think now I have something that I like. Yeah, that's not too bad. But of course we only have points, so what I did here of course is I used a copy to points and copied some spheres to it. And to save geometry, I use actually a primitive here because that's kind of the easiest geometry to render later on. And we make it much smaller, of course, something like this. And this would actually already work when we look at it because there's some of them are far away, some of them are close. But to make this a bit more interesting, I would say use a p-scale to change the scale with a random function based on the point number. And now here's the thing, depending what we see, so if the points would die because of the lifespan, ptnum would be dangerous here again. So we can as well use the ID as an input of a scale. And if you don't like vex, and let me quickly show you how this looks like, because now the scale is multiplied between 0 and 1. And actually, I now feel like I still have too fast of a gravity. And maybe the sphere is also too small. Yeah, this is better. So here we go. And actually, let's quickly give it a brighter color. So this is really just a fake, I admit. But by giving it a color that is brighter than white, so overly bright, this can be a nice fake of basically subsurface scattering. So snow works, the shading of snow works that light goes in and kind of brightens snow up. And usually you would do this properly in shading, and I did this in the past on productions. You can sometimes just fake this with an emission. So basically the snow is glowing by itself. Physically not correct, but looks good. And here we have it. Okay, that's actually pretty good. As an alternative to vex, we could have used, of course, the attribute randomize, if that's more your cup of tea. And here we change the p-scale, and then we can change the range here. P-scale, there it is. The range down here, maybe we set it to 1 dimension, and then those two numbers define the minimum and the maximum if you don't want a sphere to be too tiny. And one last thing, if you have the problem again with the changing point number, which would result in kind of a flickering scale, then actually in the attribute randomize, you can as well change the seed from ptnum to ID. If you just go to options, seed attribute, and turn it on, and the ID is already in there because SideFX knows what you want to do. So maybe you found a different solution, a probably better one, that's totally fine. But this is kind of how I would attack it for a fundamentals course, so that we understand how to think about those things and how to solve the problems that might appear. So I hope this was helpful. Merry Christmas and see you later. Cheers.